What's good, YouTube? It's Rico here. And a couple hours ago, so like earlier tonight, the the ban list finally updated. Took them long enough. This one was about 5 months from the last one. The last one took effect at the beginning of April. This one takes effect at the end of August, so effectively the beginning of September. It's like 2 days off of September 1st. So this is pretty much a September list, so it's a 5 month gap, which is the same as last time. So maybe they're trying to go for uh, longer gaps between ban lists, which I don't have a problem with. I just wish they were a little more forward with what their schedule is. Like the fact that these just drop out of nowhere is the biggest problem I really have. So yeah. Um, in terms of severity and like of the hits this time around, Um, I don't think it was as severe as last November's list, which straight up killed the entire meta game. Like everything that was meta in like that format except for Cosmo was straight murdered. This is not the case this time, but the changes are more severe than normal. So like every meta deck got hit in some way. Some of them got like slaps on the wrist or like noticeable hits, but not like killed them. There's one notable like deck that got straight murdered. Uh, so yeah, it's not as big as the November list, but it's still a pretty big deal, and that is gonna shake up, in my opinion. So I'll go over the changes, what I think about them, things I was surprised or I guess a little surprised didn't move on the list, and then how I think the overall meta is affected and what the upcoming meta is going to look like. Because I do think this list changes quite a bit. There's a good number of changes, so yeah. All right, so the first change, there are two bands. The first one is Monkey Board. So I expected this. I actually would have been more surprised if Monkey Board wasn't banned. The reason for this is that the OCG already did this. Monkey Board is honestly too good at what it does, in that it's a low scale that can search a high scale, so it completes the scales by itself. It's searchable by like Pendulum Sorcerer, Skullcrab Joker, and it's it makes the Performapal deck too consistent, in that like it nullifies the risk of setting scales because it completes the scales entirely on its own, and it's searchable. It searches out what it needs. It's too versatile and too good. And if there's any one card in the Draco Pal deck that needed to be banned, it was definitely Monkey Board. So yeah, I agree with this hit, and I expected it. So the other ban, I did not expect this, but I don't have a problem with it. Uh, Kaiser Coliseum. So this is probably the biggest like the black sheep on the list. Like I don't know why they did this. I can't think of anything coming out in the near future that actually really abuses Kaiser Coliseum. The last deck that really did abuse Kaiser Coliseum was like very early Cosmo builds, like before they had all their support, and even then it wasn't like a staple. The last deck I can think of that truly used Kaiser Coliseum as a staple was Bujin, which had to have been like 2 or 3 years ago by now. Um, so I really don't know why they did this, but I don't have a problem with it because something I've always said, and I still firmly believe this, is that Kaiser Coliseum, in terms of like overall floodgates, I don't like floodgates in general, and I don't think they should exist. But I think Kaiser Coliseum is one of the more poorly designed ones, and I think it's one of the more broken ones. But the decks that can use it are so few and far between that it's never seen. But when a deck can use it, it makes the game so ridiculously one-sided that it's like Kaiser Coliseum. I guess like it's one of the floodgates that gets closest to literally saying you cannot play the game, because locking your opponent out of like how many monsters they're allowed to play is really dumb, especially with how monster-driven Yu-Gi-Oh is. So yeah, I don't know why they did this. I have no complaints. Kaiser Coliseum can rot in hell. because fuck that card. So, those are the bans. So, limits. Seer is now limited. It's down to 1 from 2. I don't have a problem with this. Burning Abyss was, even after all the massive hits they got, they were still doing well, particularly because of Beatrice and the Phantom Knights helping them, and the Speedroids. So I really don't have an issue with this. I think it was a good hit. Ether was hit. I think Ether was, next to Pantheism, the most problematic card in Monarch, because just the being able to disrupt your opponent on their turn, or extra board presence on your turn along with loading your graveyard. Ether did too much. She was definitely way too good, and I do like the limit of her. I think that's fine. Dark Destroyer. This was really the one card in Cosmo that I think was really needing a hit, because Dark Destroyer, like the fact that it can pop itself, means it's really strong as an aggressive combo card. It can disrupt the opponent, it's not targetable, has 3000 attack, it just does too many things. And really, Cosmo, honestly, in the grand scheme of things, isn't that good. It's just that Dark Destroyer was the one really problematic card in the deck, and limiting it, I think, it will help tone that down a bit. And Magic Spectre Unicorn Kieran, I was not expecting this. I agree with it because I think Unicorn is dumb, but I was expecting they were going to leave him alone because Metal Foes can use him, and they use him really well. So I was actually a bit surprised at a Unicorn hit, but Unicorn also was seeing a lot of play towards the end of the previous format, so I guess it kind of makes sense. But yeah, Unicorn being non-targetable, 2000 attack, constant Constellar Pleiades, that even if you somehow manage to kill, will come back because it's a pendulum, it's definitely really broken. And I don't know. Kieran, honestly, is just kind of a ban-worthy card, but a limit is a step in the right direction. So, yeah. And Beatrice was limited. I was expecting them to hit Dante, similar to how the OCG did, because Dante is like what holds Burning Abyss together, and without Dante, the deck gets a lot weaker. So I was expecting Dante to get limited. Beatrice, I don't know if I'd say it's a better hit, but it's a hit to their power instead of their consistency, which I'm okay with because Burning Abyss's biggest advantage is that it's a very consistent deck. Like, it doesn't have a lot of power behind it, and Beatrice was power. So, I don't know. I think I would have been okay with either hit. This one gives Burning Abyss a little bit more breathing room, especially because the hits they have here are more severe than the ones in the OCG, because they only have one graph here and one Seer now, where in the OCG it's just Skarm and Dante at one. So, yeah. So they still have the grind game consistency through Dante, but their power's been knocked down once again with the hit of Beatrice and Seer and graph still at one. So, yeah, I'm pretty okay with this. And this stops like some jank ass Beatrice Turbo thing from happening, which like it's not. Beatrice Turbo decks aren't good, but they aren't particularly fun to play against because they are pretty much solitaire decks. So, yeah. And Emergency Teleport, this should have happened on the last list because Emergency Teleport became really dumb with the Quantums and with Cosmo, and yeah, that should have happened last time. So. Pantheism, I don't really need to explain this. Pantheism is the best card in Monarchs. Pendulum Call, this doesn't surprise me because this also happened in the OCG, even though Magician isn't really doing anything, or at least they weren't in the OCG. Magician was doing a little bit over here. I don't think Pendulum Call needed to be hit, but it also stops Magician from being, I guess, overpowered. I don't even really think they were that overpowered. I think any problem in that deck was probably Kieran. But Pendulum Call. I don't think it was a good hit. I don't think it was necessary, but it's not. All it really does is stop Magician from being really good, I guess. But yeah, I mean, this was copied straight from the OCG, and it didn't really make sense over there either, aside from to stop Magician from doing well. So, And the last limit is Monarch Stormforth. People debated a lot between whether this or Ether was deserving of a hit, and I guess Konami decided that they both deserved it. I don't entirely like the design of Stormforth, but don't feel like it was as problematic as Ether, because Stormforth does have limitations, so even though it doesn't target, it also locks you out of your extra deck for the turn, so unless you're playing straight Domain Monarch, there are restrictions to Stormforth, so I don't think it needed the hit, especially with Ether also getting limited, but I'll take it. So that's all the limits. Semi-limits are Max C. This is probably the second most unexpected hit. So this is going to be a very controversial opinion. I actually believe that Max C is not healthy for the game. I think with the game evolving over the past 2 years into a more combo-oriented, like heavy hitter format, where most of the decks try to set up really strong boards turn one with a lot of special summons, which, like, even whether you like it or not, that's how Yu-Gi-Oh has been for the past few years. I think in that kind of environment, Max C is very toxic, because if you are, like, on one hand, like, yeah, it stops decks from going crazy, because, like, it stops them from special summoning a lot, but in the situation where you're playing a big deck versus another big deck, and you go first, and you try to set up a board, and your opponent Max Cs, you have to stop, or if you feed them, you're going to get killed, because you're going to give them too much. But if you stop, you don't have a strong board presence, and then they can go off and they can kill you. So either it's a lose-lose situation. Like, you either feed them and you get killed, or you stop and you get killed. And, like, I guess, like, it's kind of hard to convey. It's a little bit of a complex opinion. This might be something to discuss in a different video, but I do think that if the game continues towards the, like, strong board and, like, the strong setup with heavy hitters meta that's been going on since Duelist Alliance, that Maxi is really not a healthy card for the game, in my opinion. It's not the worst card in the game. Like, it's not the least healthy, because not every deck affected by Maxi, like Blue Eyes, kind of shakes it off, in my opinion. But and like in that, towards the end of the last format, people were realizing that most decks could play around it, so it got out. It was no longer made, but I feel like for Maxi to be healthy, we would have to go back to the pacing that was pre-Duelist Alliance. So, like, when things were a lot slower and grindier. And, like, in that situation, I'd say Maxi is fine, but in the current state of the game, I feel like Maxi is not healthy. So, yeah. Semi-limiting it is not really that noticeable. Like, yeah, you'll see Maxi less often, but it'll still be relevant, it'll still be used. I like this better than nothing, but it could have been more. And semi-limited doesn't really do that much. And then Ryo and Magician, these are both irrelevant changes. Ryo is a stun card that is easy to deal with, and Magician, wind-ups are bad. So, and then the unlimits are also like Thousand Eyes of Spirit, that's irrelevant. Gold Sarcophagus, that's pretty irrelevant. Allure of Darkness is the only relevant one because Burning Abyss can use it, but even then it's probably not that big of a difference. So yeah, that's the entire list. It's a pretty big one. So the two changes that I was expecting that didn't happen were, I was expecting Pendulum Sorcerer to get hit. I was expecting to probably get limited. I'm guessing that didn't happen because it's about to be released in the tins, and Draco Balls were kind of struggling anyway, so having them lose Kieran and Monkey Board is probably enough to curb them. And I was expecting Norden to get banned, just to follow what the OCG did, but then they didn't. I'm guessing because very few decks in the last format used Norden at all. So, yeah. Yeah, so how I think this affects the meta. Well, Monarchs I think are dead. For Monarch to be competitive at all with this severe of hits, because in the OCG Monarchs barely relevant and they only lost Pantheism and Stormforth. For Monarch to be relevant here, they'd have to go like straight stun with like Majesty's Fiend and Vanity's Fiend, because like The extra deck version I don't think really works. Oh, actually, one other card I was expecting to be hit was Brilliant Fusion, just because it's so splashable, but I guess they didn't consider it a problem. But Monarchs, like extra deck Monarch really thrived on the Ether Storm 4th combo, and with both of those limited, it's not really worth using. So like you'd have to go Domain, and in that case you might as well go Stun with like Majesty's Fiend and Vanity's Fiend. And so I don't know what to think about Monarch, but I think that out of all the meta decks, they're the least likely one to survive. Draco Pal is probably still usable. You can't do the stun with Kieran anymore, and they lose some consistency with Monkey Board, but they can still do, like, I guess Ariadne, but I've never really cared for the Ariadne build. I still think the hamster build was criminally underrated. That's just me, but I think that's doable. Burning Abyss probably can still hold on. I don't know. Like some people are projecting it to be the best deck now. I don't agree with that. I think it's probably still up there and it's still very competitive. What else was there? Cosmo. Cosmo was struggling even without these hits. So like, losing Dark Destroyer to 1 and losing E-Telly to 1 doesn't really kill Cosmo, but there are inherent flaws of like just bricking and just like the lack of consistency when they don't get going. I think that would be enough where like losing their one really dumb card in Dark Destroyer, I feel like that makes them a lot weaker, so I can see Cosmo dying off. And those were the 4 meta decks. As for what's come out recently, so like going into what the next meta is, so I don't think Monarch's going to be a threat. Draco Pal might be still relevant. I'm not entirely sure. Burning Abyss will probably still be around. Cosmo, I would say I would lean towards it's probably going to die off. Blue Eyes did not get hit at all, so Blue Eyes is definitely going to be one of the best decks. Metal Foes, I don't know. I would argue that if Metal Foes is going to be relevant, it probably won't be until Invasion of Venom. And the reason for that is what made Metal Foes so strong in the OCG was that they had access to Cyberstein. So, and they also had access to Super Poly, but that's not relevant until later. So without Cyberstein, because we didn't get Cyberstein back, without Cyberstein and with only 1 Kieran, it's a lot harder for Metal Foes to do like really unfair plays. It feels like when you play it feels like a really fair deck. And fair doesn't win, unfortunately. Fair doesn't win unless you're playing Sheik in Super Smash Bros., but I digress. Like Metal Foes feels too fair. Like the most unfair thing it can do, outside of like spamming Kieran, which is a lot harder now with only 1, and is really just like make Ultimaya Zulkin into Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon, and without something to back it up, that's not a really powerful play, really. So, and I feel like if you're looking for an unfair pendulum deck, in the current state of things, Draco Pals is probably still a little better. So, yeah. But when they get the new stuff in Invasion of Venom, Metal Foes will probably be a lot better. So, they might have a little bit of time to wait. And then, the other deck, one that I've been toying around with recently, is Lightsworn Shiranui. And the more I play that deck, the more I feel like it might be the best deck in the game. It loads the graveyard, it grinds forever, it has a lot of power behind it. So yeah, that one I think will definitely be a contender, especially with like its 2 worst matchups were Monarch and BA, and BA was neutered where it's probably more manageable, and Monarch's just straight dead. So yeah, I can expect. I would say Lightsworn Shiranui is probably going to make some showings, and I do think on paper it's probably the best deck, but that could be wrong. I am wrong a lot of the time. And that's what I'm looking at immediately. A couple months down the line, when we get Ties with the Brethren, another Lightsworn variant might do some stuff, which is the Lightsworn with like the spams Fairy Tail Snow and just mills into Eclipse Wyvern for Judgment Dragon. It's pretty much the second coming of Lightsworn Ruler, but I don't know. I feel like that wouldn't. It's not as consistent, as Lifelong Shiranui, which also has its share of breaking problems. So I don't know how good that would actually be. Around the same time, we'll get ABC, and that'll almost definitely be a meta contender. And then when we get Invasion of Venom along with Metal Foes getting a boost, we're going to get Tree Toad, which means frog variants are going to be good. So like Frog Hero or like Frog Atlantean Mermail and stuff like that. That will probably be meta. So this is shaping up to be a really interesting format. It'll be very different from the last one, which is good because I honestly think this last format was not good at all. It really wasn't fun to play. So yeah. Sorry if this video seemed kind of rushed because it was kind of rushed. So yeah, overall, I think I like this list. I think it was good. For as long as it took, I think it did a pretty good job at changing up the game. And I'll get a duck profile out for something soon, probably Lightsworn Shiranui, because that's what I was playing earlier tonight. My only loss was ironically to Monarchs, and when he beat me, about 5 minutes later, they updated the ban list. So I told him, man, if we had played just a few minutes later. So yeah. That's all for this video. I'll be sure to turn off some more stuff because my interest in the game is going up again. So yeah, thanks for watching YouTube. I'll see you next time. Deuces.